The silence in a house with a newborn isn't really silence. It's a low-grade hum of anxiety, a state of constant listening tension. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the house settling is a potential prelude to a cry that will shatter the fragile peace. In those first few months, I was living in that hum. I was a ghost in my own home, sleepwalking through a cycle of feeding, changing, and rocking, my body aching with a fatigue so profound it felt like a physical illness. My husband, a man I had loved for his steady calm, seemed to be drifting further away with each passing day. He was working late, handling a crisis needed by the team. His excuses were always plausible, delivered with a furrowed brow and a regretful kiss on my forehead, but they were building a wall between us brick by brick. When his mother announced she was moving in to help, I was too exhausted to protest. In my depleted state, I saw it as a lifeline. She arrived with 3 oversized suitcases and the force of a gentle, well-meaning hurricane, immediately taking over the household with an air of unimpeachable authority. "You poor thing," she'd say, taking the baby from my arms. "You just go and rest. I'll handle everything. That's what a mother is for." I was grateful at first. I slept in long, dreamless stretches, something I hadn't done in months, but my gratitude soon began to curdle into a vague, unsettling unease. Her help felt less like support and more like a strategic replacement. She reorganized my kitchen, critiqued my choice of diapers, and had a story about how she raised her son that subtly undermined every mothering instinct I had. Her presence, meant to be a comfort, began to feel like a siege. The wall my husband was building grew higher, and his mother became its cheerful, tireless mason. She would greet him at the door when he came home late, a hot meal ready, shushing him past the nursery where I was trying to get the baby to sleep. "Let your wife rest," I'd hear her whisper in the hallway. "She's had a very hard day. You and I can have a quiet dinner together." They were becoming a unit, a closed circle into which I was not invited. I was being managed, handled, gently but firmly pushed to the periphery of my own life. The first concrete sign that something was deeply wrong was a scent. It was a sweet, cloying perfume, something expensive and overtly floral, and it was on his shirt when he finally came to bed one night long after midnight. It wasn't my perfume. It certainly wasn't his mother's. When I asked him about it the next morning, he laughed it off. It must have been someone at the office. We were celebrating a new contract. Before I could press him, his mother chimed in from the kitchen, her voice bright and dismissive. "Oh, for heaven's sake, a man can't even stand next to a colleague without getting the 3rd degree. The poor boy works himself to the bone for you and the baby. You should be thanking him, not interrogating him." The way they spoke in unison, her immediate, fierce defense of him, felt rehearsed. It was an alibi, not an explanation. The unease that had been simmering in my gut began to boil. I started paying attention. I was no longer a passive, grateful patient in my own home. I was an observer, a detective. I noticed the way his phone was always angled away from me, the way he'd end a call abruptly if I walked into the room. I noticed the small, expensive gifts that would appear in his mother's possession: a new silk scarf, a designer handbag, things he couldn't possibly afford on his salary, especially with the expenses of a new baby. The real evidence, the piece that shattered my denial, I found in the pocket of the suit jacket he'd worn to one of his late nights at the office. It was a receipt from a high-end jewelry store in the city. The date was from the previous week. The item was a delicate, diamond-studded bracelet, the kind of thing a man buys for a woman he is trying to impress. It was not a gift for me. It was not a gift for his mother. The name of the sales associate on the receipt was a woman's, a pretty, elegant name. I confronted him that evening, the receipt trembling in my hand. His reaction was a masterclass in gaslighting. He feigned confusion, then indignation. He claimed it was a gift for a client, a standard business practice. When I pointed out the intimate nature of the gift, he turned on me, his voice laced with a cold, wounded anger. "I cannot believe this," he said, his voice low. "I am working 20 hours a day to provide for my family, and you're accusing me of what? Having an affair. After everything you've been through, I thought you'd be more stable than this." His mother, who had been listening from the doorway, rushed to his side, placing a protective hand on his arm. She looked at me with an expression of profound pity. "Oh, you poor dear," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's the hormones. Postpartum depression can make a woman see things that aren't there. It can make you paranoid, delusional. You're not well. We need to get you help." They stood there together, a united front of calm, rational concern, painting me as a hysterical, unhinged woman, a victim of my own broken mind. In that moment, I saw their plan with blinding clarity. His infidelity was not a secret he was trying to keep from me. It was a project they were managing together. His mother hadn't moved in to help me with the baby. She had moved in to help him replace me. She was running interference, creating the space and the cover for his affair. My exhaustion, my vulnerability, my postpartum state, these were not things they pitied. They were tools they were exploiting. They were not trying to help me, they were trying to erase me. The grief was a physical blow so intense it almost buckled my knees. But on the other side of that grief was a cold, hard resolve. I would not let them win. I would not let them paint me as crazy and discard me. They wanted to manage me, fine. They would never see what was coming. I cried, I apologized. I told them they were right, that I was just so tired and not thinking straight. I played the part of the broken, paranoid wife to perfection. They exchanged a look of triumphant relief. They thought they had succeeded. They thought I had broken. That night, after they were both asleep, I sat in the dark, the blue light of my phone illuminating my face. I wasn't searching for divorce lawyers. I was searching for the best-rated, smallest, most discreet nanny cams on the market. If they wanted to make my home a theater for their deceit, then I would make sure to record every single act of their play. I was no longer the damsel in distress in their story. I was the director, and I was about to start shooting the final, devastating scene. The cameras arrived in a plain brown box, my secret arsenal in the war I was silently waging. They were tiny, sophisticated marvels of espionage, disguised as a USB charger, a smoke detector, and a small, innocent-looking teddy bear. Planting them was a nerve-wracking exercise in stealth and deception. I waited for a day when my mother-in-law took the baby out for one of her long, multi-hour walks, a ritual she insisted was vital for his lung development, but which I now knew was to clear the house for her son's activities. My husband was, of course, stuck in a meeting. With my heart pounding against my ribs, I went to work. The USB charger went into the wall socket in the living room, its tiny lens aimed directly at the main sofa. The teddy bear, with its unnervingly black, glassy eye, was placed on a bookshelf in the nursery, positioned to capture the doorway and a wide swath of the hallway. The smoke detector was the riskiest, but the most crucial. I faked a panic attack about the old one, claiming I'd read an article about house fires and couldn't sleep. My husband, eager to placate his unstable wife, installed the new, camera-equipped one in the main upstairs hallway himself, his own hands placing the all-seeing eye that would bear witness to his betrayal. The first time I watched the footage, I felt a nauseating mixture of dread and vindication. I sat in my locked bathroom, the only truly private space I had left, and watched my secret life unfold on my phone's screen. The initial recordings were a portrait of their casual cruelty. I saw my mother-in-law alone in the kitchen, mimicking the exhausted way I walked and rolling her eyes. I heard her on the phone with one of her friends, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The poor girl is just not coping," she'd say. "Thank God I'm here. I don't know what my son would do without me." I watched my husband come home and saw the way his loving, concerned mask would drop the moment he thought I was out of earshot, replaced by a weary, resentful sigh. He and his mother would sit on the sofa, my sofa, and complain about me. My moods, my parenting, my lack of appreciation for all their sacrifices. They were building a case against me, convincing themselves that their actions were not a betrayal but a necessary, even merciful response to my failings. Then one Tuesday evening it happened. My mother-in-law had made me a cup of her special calming chamomile tea, insisting I have an early night. "You look exhausted, dear," she said, her voice full of solicitude. "I'll listen for the baby." I knew the tea was probably drugged, but I drank it anyway, pretending to drift off to sleep. An hour later, I was huddled in the bathroom, watching the live feed from the living room camera. The front door opened. My husband walked in, and behind him was a woman. She was young, maybe 10 years my junior, with long, dark hair and the kind of effortless confidence that I hadn't felt in years. She was wearing the diamond bracelet. My husband kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss that was a world away from the chaste, dutiful pecks he gave me. And then the act that truly broke me. My mother-in-law emerged from the kitchen, a tray with 3 glasses of wine in her hands. She was smiling, a warm, genuine smile of welcome. She handed a glass to the woman, patted her on the cheek, and said, "It's so lovely to see you again, my dear. Make yourself at home." My home. She was telling my husband's mistress to make herself at home in my home. I watched, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a sob as the 3 of them sat on the sofa. They were a family, a happy, laughing, comfortable family, and I, lying in my bed upstairs, was the obstacle, the sick, inconvenient wife who was in the way of their perfect new life. The camera's microphone was surprisingly clear. I listened as they talked. They discussed their future, his plans to transition me out of the picture. Her desire to redecorate the house. My mother-in-law's voice was the most chilling of all. She was the architect of this coup, coaching the younger woman on my husband's likes and dislikes, giving her advice on how to handle him. "He needs a strong woman," my mother-in-law said, looking at the mistress with undisguised admiration, "not a fragile, weepy thing who falls apart at the slightest pressure." Every night for the next 2 weeks, I documented their treason. I recorded every visit, every kiss, every whispered conversation. I saved the files to a secure cloud server, creating a meticulous, undeniable library of their deceit. The grief was still there, a constant, dull ache in my chest, but but it was being overshadowed by a new, powerful emotion, a cold, methodical rage. This was no longer just about a husband's infidelity. This was a conspiracy, a calculated, cruel campaign to mentally dismantle me, dispose of me, and replace me. They thought they were in control. They thought I was a nonentity, a ghost in my own house. They had no idea I was gathering an army. The perfect opportunity for my revenge was handed to me on a silver platter. My mother-in-law was turning 70, a huge milestone birthday. She was planning an enormous party, a grand affair to be held in my home. She wanted to be surrounded by her entire extended family, all her friends, everyone who looked at her and saw a pillar of strength, a matriarch, a saint. She wanted to be celebrated. Oh, she would be celebrated, all right. I went to her, my eyes downcast, my voice soft. I'd like to do something special for your birthday, I said. I'd like to make a tribute video, a slideshow of pictures from your life, a celebration of you. Her face lit up with preening delight. What a wonderful idea, dear, she said, patting my arm. How very thoughtful of you. She gave me boxes of old photo albums, entrusting me with the curation of her life story. She had no idea she was also entrusting me with the script for her own public execution. I spent the next week in a fever of creative fury editing my masterpiece. It would be a story, all right, but it wouldn't be the one she was expecting. The day of the party was a masterpiece of suburban hypocrisy. Our house, the stage for my husband's and mother-in-law's most intimate betrayals, was filled with flowers, balloons, and the cheerful chatter of friends and family who had come to pay homage to the matriarch. My mother-in-law was in her element, a queen holding court, accepting compliments and air kisses, her face glowing with self-satisfaction. My husband played his part to perfection, the doting son and attentive husband, one arm around his mother, the other often resting on my shoulder in a grotesque parody of affection. He and his mother would exchange small, triumphant smiles over the heads of their guests, confident that their new world order was firmly in place. I moved through the crowd like a shadow, accepting condolences for how tired I looked, and listening to the endless praise being heaped upon my mother-in-law. You are so lucky to have her, an aunt told me, her voice syrupy with admiration. She is a saint, an absolute lifesaver. I just smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, and nodded. Yes, I said, I don't know what I would have done without her. The moment arrived after the cake had been cut and the champagne had been poured. My husband, beaming with pride, tapped a glass for attention. And now, he announced, his voice booming through the room, my wonderful wife has prepared a little surprise for the birthday girl. A trip down memory lane to celebrate my amazing mother. All eyes turned to the large television screen mounted on the living room wall. My mother-in-law dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, settling into a comfortable chair that was essentially a throne, ready to receive her digital coronation. I pressed play on my laptop. The video started exactly as they expected. A gentle, instrumental melody began to play over a montage of black and white photos of my mother-in-law as a little girl, a blushing bride, a proud young mother holding her infant son. The room was filled with soft ahs and nostalgic sighs. I let the pleasant charade continue for a full 2 minutes, lulling them into a state of sentimental comfort. Then, as a picture of my husband and me on our wedding day appeared on screen, the music scratched to a halt. The screen went black for a single, dramatic second. The room fell silent, confused. The first clip appeared. It was from the nursery cam, the sound crystal clear. It was my mother-in-law, standing with my husband, looking at me as I slept in a chair, the baby on my chest. She's just not cut out for this, she said, her voice laced with contempt. She's weak. You need someone with a backbone. A confused murmur rippled through the family. My mother-in-law's smile froze on her face. Before anyone could speak, the scene cut again. Now it was the living room, the camera angle from the USB charger. The lighting was low. My husband was on the sofa, locked in a passionate embrace with the young, dark-haired woman. Gasps of shock and horror filled the room. Someone's wine glass shattered on the floor. My husband leaped to his feet, his face ashen, but I just turned up the volume. The montage continued, a relentless, brutal highlight reel of their conspiracy. There was my mother-in-law serving wine to the happy couple. There was my husband complaining about my endless needs. There was the mistress laughing as she described me as the sleeping dragon. Then came the audio clips played over a black screen, making their words even more stark, more damning. My mother-in-law coaching the mistress, just be patient. Once the baby is a little older and she's had her breakdown, he can file for full custody. He'll look like a hero. My husband to his mistress, I just feel nothing for her anymore. When I look at her, all I see is a problem I need to solve. The final scene was the masterpiece. It was a close-up of my mother-in-law, her face filled with a warmth and affection she had never once shown me. She was hugging the mistress, stroking her hair. You are the daughter I always wanted, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You are so much stronger, so much more suited to him. You make him happy. The video ended. Screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute, a thick, suffocating blanket of shock and shame. Every single eye was fixed on my husband and his mother, who stood frozen in the center of the room, their faces grotesque masks of horror and disbelief. I stood up, holding my baby, who had miraculously slept through the entire presentation. I did not shout, I did not cry. My voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the silent room. "Happy birthday, mother-in-law," I said. "I wanted to give you what you always wanted, a family that sees you for who you truly are." I looked at my husband. "As for you," I continued, "consider this my formal announcement. I will be filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My lawyer has a full, unedited copy of everything you just saw, and much, much more. He will be in touch." I turned, and without another word, I walked towards the front door. The family, my family now, parted for me like the Red Sea. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the silence behind me finally broke, erupting into a cacophony of accusations, sobs, and furious, shouted questions. I didn't look back. I strapped my son into his car seat, got into the driver's side, and drove away from the house, leaving the smoldering ruins of their lives burning in my rearview mirror. They had wanted to erase me from their family portrait. Instead, I had reframed the entire picture with them at the center, exposed for all the world to see. Thanks for listening to this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Share this story with your friends, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Revenge Laura for more episodes.